The cashier's voice shook as she slid the carton back across the counter. A little girl clutched her mother's leg, eyes wide with confusion. Behind them, a man in an expensive suit froze, watching as the mother whispered an apology and turned away, empty-handed. No one noticed the way his jaw tightened or the decision forming in his eyes. Before we go any further, if stories like this move you, welcome to Kindness Tales. Take a second to subscribe, tap like if this story touches you, and share your thoughts in the comments. These moments of human connection mean even more when we experience them together. The woman's name was Rachel, and most days began before the sun came up. Her alarm rang at 5:30, though she was usually awake before it, listening to the quiet hum of the small apartment and the soft breathing of her 6-year-old daughter sleeping in the next room. Mornings were a careful dance of timing and patience. Coffee brewed while lunches were packed. Clothes were laid out the night before to save precious minutes. Every dollar had a job, and every mistake echoed loudly. Rachel hadn't planned on being a single mom. Life had simply unfolded that way. Her husband had left years earlier, disappearing into a trail of excuses and missed child support payments. What remained was a stack of bills, a second-hand car that rattled when it idled, and a fierce determination to give her daughter a childhood that felt safe and loved, even if it was modest. She worked 2 jobs. During the day, she cleaned offices in a business park just outside the city. At night, 3 days a week, she waited tables at a family restaurant off the highway. It was exhausting, but there was comfort in routine. She knew which offices left, half-finished cups of coffee, and which tables tipped better. If you remembered their names, she knew exactly how much gas she could afford and how many groceries could fit into her weekly budget. That morning at the grocery store was already a stretch. Prices had gone up again, and Rachel had stood in the dairy aisle longer than usual, comparing labels, doing mental math. Milk was one of those things she hated cutting back on. Her daughter loved cereal before school and warm cocoa on weekends. It felt like such a small joy in a world that asked them to give things up constantly. At the checkout, the total flashed higher than she expected. Rachel felt her chest tighten. She pulled out her debit card anyway, hoping maybe she had miscalculated. The card reader beeped once, then again declined. She tried not to panic, swiping a second time, cheeks burning as the line behind her grew quiet. The cashier gave her an apologetic look and said softly that the payment didn't go through. Rachel looked down at her daughter, who was staring at the candy display, blissfully unaware. Rachel whispered that she was sorry and asked the cashier to take the milk off. The carton slid back across the counter with a dull thud that felt far louder than it should have. Rachel gathered the rest of the groceries, forcing a smile, and took her daughter's hand. That was the moment the man in the suit noticed them. He had been checking his phone, impatient, used to efficiency, but something about the way Rachel's shoulders slumped, just slightly, caught his attention. He watched as she turned to leave, her daughter glancing back at the milk with confusion. The man felt an unexpected pull in his chest, a memory surfacing that he hadn't thought about in years. His name was Thomas, and on paper his life looked perfect. He owned a successful logistics company, lived in a sprawling house in the suburbs, and drove a car that turned heads without trying. Money had stopped being something he worried about a long time ago, but it hadn't always been that way. There was a time, decades earlier, when his own mother had counted coins at a kitchen table, deciding what could wait until next week. Thomas stepped forward before he could overthink it. He told the cashier to ring up the milk again, along with a few other items he had noticed Rachel put back. The cashier hesitated, then nodded. Rachel turned, startled, and shook her head immediately, insisting it wasn't necessary. Her voice was polite but firm, pride woven through the words. Thomas smiled gently and said it was no trouble at all. He knelt down slightly to be at eye level with her daughter and asked what her favorite cereal was. The girl's eyes lit up as she answered. Rachel felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, embarrassed by how quickly her emotions rose to the surface. She thanked him more times than she could count, her voice unsteady. Thomas waved it off and told her to have a good day, already turning back to his own groceries. To him, it felt like a small thing, To Rachel, it felt like someone had reached into the chaos of her life and offered a moment of grace. Rachel carried the milk out to her car like it was something fragile. Her daughter chatted happily about cereal and school, unaware of how close they had come to going without. Rachel sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, letting herself cry quietly. Not from sadness, but from relief, from being seen. She didn't expect to ever see the man again. Life moved on. Bills still arrived. Work was still exhausting. But that moment stayed with her. On days when everything felt heavy, she thought about the stranger in the grocery store and the kindness that had come, without judgment or questions. Weeks later, Rachel was working her night shift at the restaurant when she noticed a familiar face walk in. It took her a second to place him out of context in a booth instead of a checkout line. When recognition dawned, her heart skipped. It was him. She approached the table, nervous but smiling, and asked what she could get him. Thomas looked up, surprised, then smiled back. They talked while she took his order, conversation flowing easily. He asked about her day. She asked about his work. It was simple, human, unremarkable in the best way. Over the next few weeks, Thomas came in regularly, always polite, always patient when the restaurant was busy. He learned Rachel's schedule and asked about her daughter by name. Rachel found herself looking forward to those evenings, not because of anything grand, but because it felt good to talk to someone who listened. One night, after the dinner rush had died down, Thomas asked Rachel if she'd ever considered going back to school. The question caught her off guard. She laughed it off at first, explaining that she barely had time to sleep, let alone study. But Thomas listened closely as she admitted that she once dreamed of becoming a nurse. Life had simply pulled her in another direction. He didn't make promises. He didn't offer solutions right away. He just asked questions and listened. Weeks later, he handed her a folded piece of paper with the contact information for a local community college and a scholarship program. He supported quietly, without his name attached. Rachel stared at the paper long after he left. The idea felt impossible and exhilarating all at once. She talked herself out of it a dozen times before finally calling the number. To her surprise, she qualified for evening classes and financial assistance that made it feasible. It would be hard, but then again her life already was. Months passed. Rachel juggled classes, work, and motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. Thomas never pushed, never hovered. He simply checked in, offered encouragement, and showed up when he said he would. When Rachel passed her first semester with high marks, she cried again, this time in her car, gripping the steering wheel and laughing through tears. Years later, Rachel stood in a crisp uniform, diploma in hand, her daughter in the front row, clapping harder than anyone. Thomas watched from the back, quiet and proud, refusing recognition. He didn't need it. The real reward was seeing a life expand because someone had noticed a moment of need and chosen compassion. The grocery store incident faded into a story Rachel told friends when they talked about kindness. To her daughter, it became a lesson about helping others when you can. To Thomas, it remained a reminder of where he came from and who he wanted to be. Kindness doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it's a carton of milk sliding back across a counter. Sometimes it's a conversation that opens a door someone thought was permanently closed. The impact can ripple far beyond what we see. In the end, this story isn't really about a millionaire or a poor single mom. It's about the space between them, where one simple choice changed the direction of a life. Rachel went on to build a stable, fulfilling career, and her daughter grew up watching what compassion looks like in action. Thomas continued his work, quieter now, more intentional, understanding that the smallest gestures often carry the greatest weight. If there's one thing to take from this, it's that you never know what someone is carrying when they stand in front of you in line, at work, or in passing. A moment of kindness can become a turning point. So if you have the chance to help, even in a way that feels small, take it. And if you've experienced a moment like that, whether giving or receiving, share it in the comments. Your story might be the next ripple of kindness someone else needs to hear.